A pretty good agenda today. This is being February the second month with the 22nd day and the 22nd year of the century, and a Tuesday nonetheless. So welcome everyone. This I think is our sixth year or so of doing these cybersecurity webinars. Goal is just to kind of take a look at what's been happening in the news, what's been happening, kind of what we've learned from the field and so forth, to kind of bring that to light so that people can be educated, I guess, about events and so forth that are happening around them to make better choices for themselves. So I've got an agenda here in front of you. We've got some stories about the Red Cross having a issue. They actually had the issue in November, but it kind of came to light in January, and new details here in February. Talking about Teams, the platform that we're using here, and some stories about some dangers thereof, cybersecurity insurance. We've got some things we've learned from the field. I'll just say, just things that are transacting, Microsoft licensing, and some of the things we're learning around that as it relates to security. And certainly when it comes to the vendors, we're going to look at end of life for some really important products that we find that are pretty prevalent out in the marketplace. You want to be mindful of. And we're going to talk about a little bit of compliance and CMMC and how there's some product overlays from Cisco and Microsoft that maybe have some value too. So hopefully a good agenda with a little bit for everyone, and hope to provide this to you. Again, the deck will be provided afterwards, so if there's links and so forth, you certainly can hit those. Always try to put the NIST cybersecurity framework up just to remind ourselves that while a great deal of attention is always spent to the protect side of the house, on the protect pillar, you really can't protect from everything. Oftentimes, as good as our protection systems can be and can be designed, that some emphasis needs to be placed on the detection of when things have gone awry, and response and recovery systems also, which might include things like incident response plans or otherwise. So just a reminder that we have 5 pillars of protection or of security here in our organizations. So in the news, we'll start with those. Microsoft Teams, this came to light here in the last week. This effectively is taking advantage of, I guess, to be specific, threat actors are targeting Teams by planting malicious documents in chat threads. So we have a chat thread here going on, and malicious documents have been shared in chat threads. How this is occurring is typically, obviously, not by necessarily by internal users, but the first thing that's happening, which is the first problem we've been having with, let's say, mailbox access too, is people are either guessing or stealing or phishing credentials for users, and they're logging into as the user. Now, oftentimes we saw this as mailbox takeovers, and you would see, emails go out to vendors and kind of hidden. We have actually a service that helps detect when this is occurring for your organization, helping users, again, just detect. You actually have had a breach at that point, but we're detecting the breach and helping you go through password changes and remediation steps. In this particular case, if the breach goes on, the threat actors are taking that login credentials. They're going in, they're dropping a file. Actually, the file is often called, for now, the findings are that it's called usercentric.exe. And obviously has a payload within it, and when users are executing that executable in the chat session unknowingly from what is purported to be a trusted user, one of your own employees, people are executing it, and it's dropping payload onto individual workstations that are hitting it. There are protection mechanisms for what files can be broadcast within a chat session. That is not by default. There are other There are capabilities to do this through data loss prevention with Teams and so forth. So there are remediation steps that can be and should be taken from a protection perspective. But at this point, the news is that there are some EXEs getting dropped into chat sessions, and something to be mindful of. For patching, every Tuesday of the first Tuesday of the month, there's a drop from Microsoft of the patches. Krebs does a very good job of articulating what those patches are for the month. So I often refer to this article. Last month was horrendous, right? There was a number of critical vulnerabilities relative to Windows servers, Exchange, and further. After the patches were distributed, there were some issues with the patches. They had to be re-rolled out, and I walked through some procedures for manual approval of those patches, those redone patches, as WSUS was not going to push those patches out naturally for any user. So they were important patches, and you had to take some extra steps to get them applied to your servers. This month is actually relatively innocuous. No quote unquote critical findings. They did have several important ones that are being found out in the wild, but generally relatively light. There are 4 dozen flaws as an example. So by number, certainly there's many of them, but nothing too terrible to worry about this month. A few that I did want to point out kind of surfaced up on the screen. SharePoint Server on-prem versions, there's a CVE that was an issue and rectified, and I did it this way just to have the links in the window so that you can go follow up and or look for a screen print of that. But we've got Windows 11 issues with the elevation of privilege. There's a link. Krebs himself referred to SANS Tuesday Roundup, which is actually a listing of all the patches and what their CVE, resounding CVE that they're solving, as well as any notes that they have regarding rollbacks and so forth. So this will help. You know, like I said, last month was horrendous. It was there were a lot of challenges with patch deployment, and a lot of organizations have just said, you know, we don't want to be in the patching business. Let's just have a managed service provider take care of the patching process for us. So I think at this point we're up over 5,000 systems a month that we're patching within that 30-day time window in working with customers on their servers. So a number of things happening in the patch space, but nothing too critical this month. Red Cross had a breach, as mentioned in February. The International Committee of the Red Cross, or ICRC, came to light with all the details of it. In January, actually, is when they disclosed about 500,000 users in the Restoring Family Links program, which is designed to, you know, do nothing but good, right? Reunite families separated by war, disaster, and migration. Unfortunately, that program and those systems were attacked. It does look to be a nation state at the time. Those were the details, and in fact, as we're learning now, as the news is kind of coming out, it does appear to be an Iranian-backed organization that is, you know, from a nation-state perspective, that was taking advantage of Zoho's Manage Engine AD Self-Service Plus password management system. We had actually talked about that breach right here on This Month in Cyber back in December. I think the breach actually occurred in November, but a month later, we were talking about that, right? If anybody had Zoho's Manage Engine, there were problems with it and so forth. So unfortunately, the Red Cross did not get to patching that system in time. After getting in, I think they realized that they were in a rich environment and provided some high-level capabilities, looked like some code that was very specific even to the server MAC addresses for them. So once they got in, they realized they were in a rich environment and really went after some of the systems. So the Red Cross had urged the hackers not to share, leak, or sell the extremely sensitive data accessed. And unfortunately, in a Krebs article, which was on the same topic, Krebs got into some details about someone known as the sheriff. I say these only because to some degree they're interesting, but you know, think about the unfortunately the implications behind this. The sheriff is selling this data to the highest bidders. As you can kind of see, you see guarantor only. The way the article reads is essentially when people are doing things through those channels, it's usually pretty advanced stuff, and that means they really do have things to sell, so that it does appear to be legitimate. The FBI had a warrant for quote unquote the sheriff, again, Iranian-based from about a year ago, but has been unable to serve or find or obviously stop the person in their tracks as they're behind lines that don't necessarily agree with United States legalities. So in any case, unfortunately, the data does appear to be being sold, and that's kind of what's happening in the Red Cross world. This next slide, and I call this in the news, was around cybersecurity insurance. I think we've been touting for months the idea that cybersecurity insurance is A, getting more expensive, and B, getting difficult to renew policies. And I provide you additional evidence here this month. This is US-based News Corporation, a sizable organization that said 3 of the following quotes that I want you to look at. 1, I won't read that one to you. Costs are going up quickly. Secondly, the ability to get it is declining. There are a lot of organizations that write cybersecurity insurance that are getting out of the market, right? They're finding that they don't have the chops effectively to go keep up with either the rising costs, they're getting swallowed up by larger fish, or they don't want to put the homework in to go evaluate risk more thoroughly, which effectively is what we're finding is that organizations are having you go fill out, pretty extensive questionnaires to get a quote, right? And a lot of those questionnaires have yes, nos. Let's just say around multi-factor authentication, there might be 5 questions. Do you have MFA on all of your external mailboxes? Maybe your answer is yes. Do you have it on all remote access, and that could be VPN, Citrix, or otherwise? Yes or no. And an answer to no in many of these cases might preclude them from providing you a quote altogether. And then there's a different questionnaire for a different quote to be provided. So again, the challenges are somewhat just in the logistics of it, but also from a marketplace perspective, costs up, number of insurers down. And so much so that US News-based Corp said, the company cannot be certain that its current level of insurance or the breadth of its terms and conditions will continue to be available on an economically reasonable terms. And all of those words, I'll paraphrase, we can't afford or even get insurance. The implication, it seems, is that they're going to need to beef up their security before they even try and go and apply for insurance. And we have lots of examples of that, of customers that are going through that same effort in our marketplace too. But that's what's happening. So if your cybersecurity insurance is 3-6 months out, it might be time to start looking now and maybe shoring up some of the systems that they're going to be looking for: MFA, security awareness, limiting privileged access, things of that nature. All right, more from in the field. I provide you this graphic, which I found as probably the best representation of what's going on. This is my attempt to explain Microsoft a little bit. Microsoft, several years ago, in fact, in the referenced article, you'll see September 2020, decided to use Defender as the naming, brand naming, if you will, from an umbrella perspective for a number of their products. And so you've seen a number of products that you may have known as one thing become something Defender, or Defender for something. And it's not my job at this point to articulate every product and everything they do, but I guess I wanted to make sure you were aware that the Defender branding is being prolific. Things that we might have known before, like I don't know, Azure ATP became Microsoft Defender for Identity, right? So a pretty big name change for something that you thought you knew and kind of had your handle around, either from a licensing perspective or considering for deployment. So a number of changes there. The Defender branding continues. In fact, as I looked at this graphic, and I'll use the laser pointer here, at the time right here in the blue, and it's very difficult probably for you to see, but it says, this did not go through a name change. Well, in fact, it did. Microsoft Cloud App Security is now Defender for Cloud App. So that actually did go through a change. And then there's additional products that have been come along here too. I got to get back to, there we go. Including for the Azure Defender for servers, Azure Defender for IoT, for SQL. Microsoft last month put the wraps on a pilot called Defender for Business, which is a kind of a amalgamation of several products, which is right here. It's really primarily Defender for endpoint in the bottom left-hand corner, but with some alerting and defense mechanisms on the back. So in any case, a lot going on in that space. And I guess I put this out there only to let you know we understand this stuff pretty well. And if you're trying to, and we have pilots around a number of Defender areas. In fact, I think we have 5 different pilots that we can do with 5 different products, if you will. So if there's, if you own it and you're interested in evaluating its capability to help, we can help in that space. That's really, I guess, to just kind of break out the language a little bit. All right, the next and last in this area was just kind of in the field. We have a tool that I wanted to bring to your attention. A lot of organizations are, focus on their perimeter security. They have firewalls. They do external penetration scans. Maybe do a security assessments from the outside in, whether those be vulnerability scans, which is just kind of port-based, or penetration scans where someone's actually trying to come in. But oftentimes, you need a flashlight for inside the house, right? If you're on the network, are there exposures to your Exchange server, or how are your servers today? Are they patched, not patched, and are they configured properly? Well, one of the gold standards, if you will, is the Center for Internet Configuration Audit Tool. Configuration Audit Tool is designed and through the years has grown up to look at how things are configured, whether it be a router, a firewall, a switch, a server, a Windows operating system, a Linux-based system, VMware, your browsers, Microsoft Office, Apple, Mac OS. You're entertaining a lot of different devices today, and you're asking, your staff to have a lot of expertise in a lot of areas. And unknowingly, focusing a lot of attention, again, both on protection and on the perimeter, you may be leaving gaps on things that are exposed internally, or things that have, could have a lower security posture internally than they should have. And so we bring to you, I guess, a tool that we've been using for years for some customers called the RAT or the CAT tool, SysCAT, as we call it internally. And effectively, it's giving us a 1 through 100 score on the configuration of your devices, whether those be Office, browsers, VMware, servers, Linux, routers, phones. Kind of is irrelevant. It looks at it from an IP perspective and gives you a 1 through 100 score. So you kind of know where to pay attention. And we find that to be of some value. So I guess I just wanted to highlight that as kind of a tool that we've had in our back pocket, and I don't think gets enough attention out there with our customers, but know that that's available. All right, we're going to move to in the field. I used to call this in the trenches, but out of respect for the idea that we're not truly at war, that we'll make this in the field. And Microsoft, as we've kind of been discussing, has certainly had price changes and what they call subscription changes as they move to something, the new commerce experience for their licensing. And we're busy transacting that for a number of customers. As we all know, the price increase for Microsoft licensing goes into effect on March 1st. Out of a lot of these discussions, we're seeing a lot of customers purchasing a lot of security. And again, it's not your goal to necessarily understand this, but do know that we do. Things like Azure Active Directory Premium Plan 1 is now owned by a lot of customers. Out of all those, 16 checkboxes there are 4 I would love to articulate to you. Now's not the time or the place, but the 4 that are there are the ones that our customers predominantly are using. Some of them are extremely easy to step into. They have different levers and so forth and different methods of what they're protecting, but those are an important 4. Equally, under the Enterprise Mobility Suite, things like Intune or Microsoft Endpoint or Config Manager and Endpoint Protection are things that should be known. Again, the other things, they're not throwaway, but they're not high value, or at least not deployed by a lot of users. Microsoft Defender for Office 365 Plan 1, a great way to protect incoming email. A lot of organizations are starting to own this now through their business premium ownership, or finally catching on that that Microsoft's default spam and antivirus engine is not often enough to protect from zero-day threats. And as mentioned, there's other products out there too. Microsoft Identity, Defender for Identity, risk-based conditional access, and identity protection. So again, it's kind of a Microsoft soup, if you will, of stuff. We understand it and can help you digest what might be actionable or needed. And then Microsoft Defender for Business, which just came out in preview release and is available for trial for customers for Business Premium. Folks own it, and others are able to trial it before it becomes $3 per user per month. All right, with our remaining 8 minutes, I want to kind of give you some updates, and this slide in particular is probably the most important of all the ones I'll cover. In May of this year, you have two levels of Windows 10 that are rolling off support, 1909 and 20H2. I'll articulate with a graph in the next slide what that looks like, but do know that Windows 10 is not just Windows 10, right? There are effectively, as enterprise, if you own an enterprise license for your desktop, you get 30 months to sit on that Windows 10 version before you have to roll off. For someone that owns Pro, you get 18 months, okay, a year and a half. So Windows 10 is ever cycling, and in fact, we're in Windows 11 now, as a friendly name is, but under the hood, Microsoft is refreshing Windows 10 twice a year or Windows 11 twice a year. So you really can only be N-2 revs old on a typical non-licensed or a Pro version of that. So again, we'll cover that a little more in one graphical slide. Very important on this next one, August 2022. So Azure AD Connect is the synchronization process between your on-prem AD and your cloud Azure AD. It's responsible for pushing identities up there. You create a new user, Joe. Joe becomes Joe up in the cloud in Azure AD, and then you can apply licensing to them, and they could be a subscriber to Office 365 and so forth. It can be bidirectional also. So when you're logging into Office 365, things like passwords can be synced from AD to the cloud, or if you changed it using self-service password reset or at home over the weekend, it can synchronize back to AD. So important service, and that service, all 1X are going end of life in August of 2022. For point of reference, 80% of our managed customers are still on a version 1X of Azure AD Connect. Why? Why is it going end of life? Well, under the hood, it's reliant on SQL Server 2012 and some of the components thereof, and that is what's going end of life. So you got to get off Azure AD Connect 1X by August. It will require a higher version of SQL, which you may not have yet, and some work to be done. So I point you to the articles there to talk about it, but even some of the 2X versions are actually already going end of life. So there's some, you want to be up the chain in the 2X here by the summer. And then in October, be mindful of the fact that VMware 6.7 is going end of life. Also, again, we do still have, maybe 20 or 30% of our customers have some VMware 6.7 hosts with guests on top of it. So some things to be mindful of. All right. I don't know what was going on with that. I think that was just, oh, maybe I went the wrong direction. Oh, there we go. I went the wrong direction. Here was that graphical slide I mentioned. Again, a little bit of this is from Wikipedia, not the FBI, as improperly referenced in the bottom right there, but you can see the May 10th, 22 date on the outer column for the 1909 That is the last date for support of that operating system, and then that same date is on the 20H2 line, which again is only the third oldest version, if you will, or the third newest version of Windows 10, and yet it's going end of life for those that have Pro. So I'll correct that source in the file before we post it on the web. Couple quick updates from HPE rather. They have some BIOS updates, which are important for your servers. So if you're running some on-prem models, the models impacted and so forth are available at this link. But those BIOS updates we found to be very important. All of our engineers are running those server BIOS updates and or scheduling it, as it does require some outage on the server itself, as for our customers that are managed. Last but not least, I guess I wanted to give you a snapshot of this is relative to CMMC. So CMMC is a standard that's mostly going to be impactful for DoD or Department of Defense suppliers. Most manufacturers actually will fall in this space probably in the next 1 to 3 years. The process for compliance can be anywhere from 8 to 18 months. We've got some expertise in our own Joe Guarini, who is a registered CMMC expert. And but if CMMC is not your compliance standard, this could be your compliance standard that you are subject to, whether it be a NIST, ISO, maybe it's even privacy rules. Nonetheless, you kind of need to know where vendors overlay and how their products can help you achieve compliance. And fortunately, Cisco, Microsoft, and others have what they call product placemats or things of that nature, where, as you can kind of see in the red boxes that are articulated there, those are areas where we've got deep expertise. And we can take that deep expertise on the products along the top and combine that with our CMMC knowledge of how to meet those control needs on the left-hand side to help you in total achieve and work towards a CMMC compliance. We also have another tool called a Compliance Manager, which is designed to gather evidence that you are meeting the needs for each of those CMMC standards as articulated on the left. So again, whether it be CMMC or other standards, we do have the tools in place and the knowledge of vendor outputs to match the two and make them work for your benefit. Similar for Microsoft, a little bit of a word soup, probably a little harder to see, but Microsoft also has a product placemat where you could say, hey, I have this Defender and I have this product and I have Azure ADP 1 and it's deployed, or this one I have licensed but not deployed. You can kind of put those attributes in on the left-hand side and it's going to tell you what controls you're likely meeting or could be meeting on the right-hand side to a very fine detail with some drill-in capability. So we understand these tools, we understand the Microsoft part, and just wanted to kind of put that in your eyeballs to let you know that this was possible. All right, we have an event coming up in March that you would want to be interested in addition to this month in security. At the end of the month, we also are hosting a M365 security where we're going to walk through some of that Microsoft tech soup around what's important in the stack of licensing that you either own or could own. And we're going to do so in a bit of a combination of a lab environment as well as a PowerPoint and whiteboarding. This is an hour-and-a-half event on March 9th. And we've run these events before. We try to make them a little bit different each time to kind of cover some different aspects of Microsoft's technologies. Our blog space, certainly for a recap of an event like today, it would be out there. So if you wanted to see our M365 when we ran it before, you actually could look at a recap, and you don't need to watch the full hour and a half. Right? We've recapped it to some short snippet videos or to a summary statements in the blog itself. So things like that are available on our blog site. We usually post a couple blogs per week. With that, I will conclude. And Nora, I guess we could stop recording, and if there's any questions in the chat, I'll check them now. It's 11:30, so I want to be respectful of your time. If anyone needs to go, that's fine too. I don't see anything myself in the meeting chat. If anyone needs to come off mute and ask a question, feel free. Thank you very much, all, and we will see you back here in March. Enjoy your 2022.